Good morning, New Life Lincoln Park. We're glad that you're with us this morning. If you're in the room or joining from home, please stand. We're going to join in some songs of worship this morning to our King, for he is worthy. Let's just sing his praises this morning.
Everything
this morning, Lord, declaring that you are good. Lord, that you are in control of everything. Lord, that you are creator. That you are doing great things, Lord, that you are moving, that you are an active, relational God. Lord, that you are loving and gracious. Lord, that as we walk through life, this journey that feels like our feet are in mud sometimes, Lord, I pray that we know that you are with us, that you are working on us, that we are not finished, Lord, that we have not found our true glory in your presence with you for eternity yet. Lord, I pray that as we think about walking through this life, our day-to-day, Lord, that we want to be drawn to you. We want to be a reflection of you, your light, your salt in this earth. So I pray that we are open-hearted, open-minded, Lord, that you are moving and working on us. Lord, that we're available for you to lead. Lord, we are humble and willing to serve for your glory and for your name, and for a greater knowing and relationship with you and your people. Lord, lead us this morning as we worship you.
In my mother's womb, you formed me with your hands, known and loved by you. Before I took a breath, when I doubted, Lord, remind me I'm wonderfully made. You're an artist and a potter, I'm the canvas and the clay. You make all things work together for my future and for my good. You make all things work together for your glory and for your name. There's a healing light just beyond the clouds. Where I walk through fire, I see clearly now. I know nothing has been wasted, no failure or mistake. You're an artist and a potter, I'm the canvas and the clay. You make all things work together for my future and for my good. You make all things work together for your glory and for your name.
So God, we thank you that you're not finished yet. Lord, that you will come again in glory. Lord, we will praise your name together as one voice, as one people, as one body. God, I pray that as we go this week, Lord, that you would remind us of how you've made us. Remind us of your goodness. Remind us that you have a plan. Remind us that you are in control. Remind us that you are with us. Remind us, Lord, that you won't let us fall. Lord, that you are there for us, to hold us, to carry us, Lord, to teach us and mold us. Lord, when we doubt it, remind us. May that would be our prayer this week, Lord, that when we feel off, when our emotions are pulling us which and every way, Lord, that you be our reminder, that you be our truth that we hold on to each morning, each night. Lord, thank you for this time that we've had to worship you. Lord, we've had to pause, to reflect, to give you glory. I pray that it's affected us, Lord, that it's refreshed us, encouraged us, Lord, drawn us closer to your heart. Lord, that we know your love a little bit deeper. Be with us through this service. In your Son's holy name. Amen.
Hey everyone, sorry, don't sit down just yet. It's so good to see all of you. We're going to go into our 2-minute mingle. So community is very important to us. It's not just part of our name within the church. We really want to give people opportunities to meet people and connect with one another. And so we also know that, so the idea of just coming in, I just want to sit down and not talk to anybody, so we don't have it for 20 minutes. So 2 minutes, just find somebody that you don't know, find out, snow, yes, no, super excited about the little flurries I found, no, that's not really good. Find somebody that you haven't met yet and just get to know them for the next 2 minutes. Then we'll reconvene. All right, everyone. Sorry to interrupt, even though it's great to see your conversations. Hopefully that wasn't too painful. and able to meet somebody new, but we're really glad that you're here. If I haven't been able to meet you yet, my name is Bobby, and I'm the campus pastor here at New Life Lincoln Park. But New Life Lincoln Park is one part of all of New Life Community Church. We're one community, one church family that's spread out over 25 different locations in the Chicagoland area, plus a few abroad. Really wanting to be the hands and feet, the message of Jesus in whatever communities God places us. So not just one big place and expecting all of Chicago to come to us. We want to bring Jesus to Chicago, and really grateful that we can do that, and grateful we can do that here. Grateful that you're a part of it, and so you chose to be with us this morning, whether you're watching online or you're here in the pews. We're really grateful that you did choose to come and join us, and I don't know why you did. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's curious. Maybe there's something you're going through. Maybe you're trying to figure something out. Whatever that is, we're just glad that you're here, and we're glad that you're connecting. And so grateful that you chose to be with us. If this is your first time, there's a QR code on the screen in front of you, whether you're at home or here. It's the same QR code that's in the pew. That will take you to our connection card. And at the very top of that is our connection point. At the very top of that is a link if this is your first time with us. If your phone doesn't do that, you can also text the word welcome to that 773 number. It does the exact same thing. But if you're new with us today, if you wouldn't mind going there, and it just asks you for some really brief information. We promise we're not going to solicit you or spam you or sell your information, but that comes directly to me, and I would love to be able just to thank you for joining us this morning. And plus to be able to pray for you. And so if there's anything specifically going on that we can do that, I would love to be able to pray for you and answer any questions you have about the church. But most importantly, just to tell you, we are so glad that you're here. That connection card, that's really, whether it's your first time or you've been here for a long time, that's our one-stop shop for communication. So we don't, for example, and also just other kind of getting connected type things for small groups, community groups, for getting involved in the church. We don't pass bags for anything if you want to worship through giving. There is a wooden box in the back if you want to do that here in person, but most everyone does it online, and so the link is there. It's really easy to set up. And plus, anything else that you would need is right in that. So make sure you have that bookmarked on your phone. Before we get into our message today, we have a few announcements we want to go over with you. And the first one actually comes to us via video. This is our All New Life monthly update. So let's check this out.
Hi, New Life family. We are approaching the Thanksgiving season. And you know what? I am very thankful, especially this year and especially at this time, for a big celebration. It's the 35-year anniversary of what we call New Life Community Church. Now, we were planning a big celebration. COVID kind of changed that around, but we still want to celebrate. It was 35 years ago that a very small group of people gathered in Back of the Yards neighborhood in the southwest side of Chicago. I was 21 at the time. The congregation was 18 people. We had no idea what God would do. I remember our first baptism. We didn't even have a baptistry. We didn't really have a worship team. But we had a vision and the sense that God wanted to do something extraordinary. What a journey it has been. Very few churches can say that they have grown consistently year after year after year. We've seen thousands upon thousands of people come to Christ. It's been an extraordinary God movement. We went from one location planting 27 locations around the city of Chicago, 43 worship services, English, Spanish, Mandarin. We've planted several locations overseas as well. We've gone from 18 people to thousands of people, most of those who came to know Jesus at our place. This has been an extraordinary church movement to be a part of. But I want to say this. I celebrate the past, so grateful for it, but I'm so excited about the present and the future. I believe that we live in a God moment, a moment where we can't waste the opportunities, a moment that God has opened to us more opportunities now than ever before. But on this Thanksgiving time, I wanted to pause and say thank you. Some of you have been with New Life for over 30 years. Thank you for your faithfulness. Some of you have just started to be a part of this church maybe last month. I want to say thank you. You've joined an extraordinary movement. Many of you have come to know Christ in this place, and I want to say thank you that you rolled up your sleeves and have joined a God vision. Thank you for praying. Thank you for giving. Thank you for participating. And would you believe God with us for the future, for us to see miracles like we've never seen before, to touch lives like we've never seen before, to tackle God dreams like we've never seen before. Hey, would you put your hands together and just thank all of the people that have been involved in this God movement, from all the way up on the north side, all the way from Elgin to Hobart, from Humboldt Park to Bridgeport to Midway to Little Village and a whole bunch of other places. Would you put your hands together as we say, thank you, God, for what you have done. God bless you.
Definitely need to do is to be able to thank God for what He's doing and being grateful for how God is changing lives and being grateful to be a part of that. And for me, I'm incredibly grateful to be a part of New Life. Jeanette and I were joking around that as long as we were in youth ministry, we've officially turned the corner where we've been pastoring at New Life for longer than we were doing youth ministry. And so to just be a part of this community for so long and to see what God is doing, it is a privilege. A bunch of us, the pastoral team, met yesterday for a long time and just thinking about the future and dreaming about the future, and it was exciting. And so just really grateful. I want to communicate that. Just really grateful to be part of this community. And on that note, I want to say, I really want to ask you to be here next Sunday. It's a special Sunday for me. Next weekend is actually my 10th anniversary as the pastor here at Lincoln Park. And so I wasn't saying it for that reason. And I really want to speak about not only the last 10, but thinking ahead to the next 10. And so I really want you to be here for that. And so if you haven't been around for a while, make sure you're here next Sunday. And if maybe you haven't been on site in a while, let that be the Sunday you come back. Because I really just think it's important for us to look ahead as a community, to be honest about the present, to be celebratory of the past, but look ahead in anticipation of what God is doing. And I'm really excited to be able to talk about that next week. And so I really want you to be a part of that. A couple other announcements. One, we want to do baptisms next Sunday. We don't have anybody signed up for that as of yet, but that doesn't mean that we can't do baptisms. And so we want to. This is what we're about. And so when you think about recently, the last year, since the last time we've done this, which was pre-COVID, have you begun following Jesus? Has that new life with Him started for you? And if you've recently begun following Him, you've put your trust in the Lord, but you've never been baptized, this is part of following Jesus. It's about publicly letting people know, I am a follower of Jesus. It's letting the church know, I'm one of you. I'm with this. I know I'm not alone because I'm part of this faith community. And so it's an important step of faith. Maybe you've never been baptized. Maybe the church you've come from or the kind of the way you've grown up, that wasn't a thing. It's a biblical thing. And so if you need to be baptized, we would love to do that next week, celebrate with you. When I'm going to pray here in a moment for the message, and if you want to come in the back and slip out, we can talk about that. After service, if you have any questions, come and see me, and we'll talk about that. But we want to make sure if you need to get baptized, we want to celebrate with you. Last thing just to remember is that not next Sunday, but the Sunday after that, so the 28th, we're going to be going back to one service. And so this is Thanksgiving weekend. We'll be at one service basically through the Christmas season. So coming into probably mid-January, end of January, we'll switch back to two services, but just knowing that Lincoln Park is not a community that people typically come to for holidays, but one that you leave for holidays, and plus most of our students are going to be gone. It's just an easy break for our volunteers to go down to one service. So that's really all that it is. It's just calling reality. And so we'll be back to two in January, and we'll let you know ahead of time when that's going to be. But just make sure you mark your calendars that on the 28th, 2 weeks from today, we're going to be doing one service. All right? And so I'm really excited that today you get to hear Mark and Josie Condra. So Mark and Josie have been part of our church for a long, long time. I think, Josie, were you already here? So Josie was already here when I first came, so she's been here for a long time. Mark kind of came along with the deal. Josie started. But how long have you guys been married? 10 years. So they've been 7. Oh, well, you're getting there. So 7 years. They are missionaries in Southeast Asia, and so we're really grateful to be able to support them and what they're doing in the world. They're home right now, spending some time here in Chicago and also just traveling a little bit, but we're really excited that they get to be the ones bringing the message, and so I'm grateful for that. I'm going to pray, and then they're going to come up and share with us. God, we do thank you so much for the fact that you are God, that you are Lord, that you're in charge. You are the leader of the church. You are what the church is all about. You are the one that holds everything together. You are the one that makes everything happen. You are who gives us life and power. God, you are why we are here. I pray that you would remind us of that. God, I pray that you would remind us of who we are and who we are in you and what we're a part of, that we are part of something greater than ourselves. God, I pray that you would give us an appreciation and love and an awareness for our identity in you. I'm just so grateful for this faith family. God, I pray you be with us this morning. Pray you be with Mark and Josie as they speak. I pray that you would be the one speaking through them. I pray that you would challenge us. I pray that your word would encourage us. And Spirit, you would just move in this place in the hearts of those who are listening, and we would hear exactly what you want to say. And so we thank you for it in your name. Amen.
Okay, so this morning our passage that we're going to speak from comes from Genesis, starting in chapter 25 and going to 33. So you're welcome to follow along if you want, or read it later this week in your devotions. But we're going to look at the story of Jacob and his journey of faith.
Who am I? I've been called many names throughout my life: deceiver, liar, thief, cheater, backstabber. I've also been called mama's boy, Jacob, father of many nations, Israel. When I was growing up, my parents often told us the story of how my brother and I were born. You see, for 20 years, my father, Isaac, and my mother, Rebecca, were married before they could have children. They were unable to have children for 20 years until my father, Isaac, started praying earnestly to the Lord that he would give my mother children. Sure enough, she became pregnant, and she was really excited, of course, and anticipating what baby this would be, until she started feeling great agony in her womb. She cried out to God, "Why is this happening to me? I feel like there's a war happening." God answered her and said, "Two nations are inside of you. From the very beginning, they will be rivals. One nation will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." So first, my brother Esau was born, and he came out, and he was red, like he was covered with like a red coat. He was so furry and had so much hair on him, and he quickly gravitated and became attached to my father. I came out grasping at his heel, as smooth as could be, and I quickly developed a relationship with my mother. You see, Esau became this hunter. He became a skilled outdoorsman, and my father loved him because he would go out and hunt and bring back wild game. My father, Isaac, he loved to eat it. Me, on the other hand, I worked more at home. I developed this close relationship with my mother, but I also worked a lot at the family business. I became a skilled shepherd. I poured my time and invested my time into developing our business. And it started, my family, we were pretty wealthy, and we were getting even more wealthy. So I started to think to myself, Esau, he's the firstborn son, right? So he gets an extra inheritance. He gets the right of the firstborn son. I started to think to myself, why should Esau get this? He's off spending his time in the woods half the time. Doesn't even contribute anything to the family except for a good meal every once in a while. So I started to plot and plan. How was I going to get my extra share of my father's inheritance? So one day I planned and I went out. I kind of paid attention to where Esau went that day, and I set up a little camp where I knew he would be coming through on his way back from hunting. Sure enough, he comes along empty-handed, like always, right? And he comes in, and he smelled that I was making some lentil stew. He smelled the bread that I baked, and he said, "Jacob, give me some of that stew." I said, "Okay, hang on, don't worry, I'll get you some." But first, give me your birthright. Give me your inheritance as the firstborn son. My brother was so irritated with me. We were always this way. What do I care, he said. It doesn't matter if I'm dead. I can't use it then. I said, okay, well, if you want your stew, swear it to me. So he did. He swore it to me, and I gave him a few appetizers. So the birthright was one thing, but it was clear that God was blessing my family. See, God had made this special covenant relationship with my grandfather, Abraham. And he made him a very wealthy man. And then that blessing passed to my father, Isaac. The question was that blessing going to come to me or to my brother? So I started to set my eyes on how to obtain that blessing. After a while, a famine struck the land, and my family, we moved to the region of Gerar. God spoke, God the Lord, Yahweh, he spoke to my father and said, go to the land of Gerar, there you will meet King Abimelech, king of the Philistines is there. So we went, and my father, he did kind of, we always know how to manipulate the situation to kind of get what we want. So when we went to the land of Gerar, he lied and told the king there that his wife was really his sister. King Abimelech, when he found out, he was furious. But he couldn't send my father too far away, you see, because the blessing was evident to everyone. That year, I said we were shepherds, right? So we planted crops, and when the harvest time came, we reaped 100 times what we had sown. It was amazing, more than all the skilled farmers of Gerar. What we were able to bring back, it was clear to everybody that there was something different. And my father was becoming a wealthy, powerful man. Eventually, there was envy from the Philistine people, and we kind of had to move out of the city, and we encountered a lot of problems. The Philistines were filling in our wells, and there was a lot of opposition towards us. But one problem rose head and shoulder above all the others. You see, my father was getting old, and he was beginning to go blind.
My husband would be the last one to admit that he was getting old. He was a proud man. He was pretty successful in everything he did, but he was pretty reticent to admit that he was getting old. But the question remained, who would this blessing pass to? We had two sons, and Esau was the older, but they were essentially born at the same time, right? So one day I heard Isaac call Esau into his tent, and he said, I want you to go out. I want you to get some really good game and come back and cook me the food that I love, and then I will eat it and I will bless you. I mean, Esau loved to hunt, but I've never seen him move so fast. Quickly, he grabbed his bow and his arrows, and he was out of there. I knew we didn't have much time because Esau was highly motivated. I recalled back to when I carried these two boys in my womb, and God had spoken to me. He had made me a promise. He said that the older would serve the younger one, but clearly he'd forgotten because here my husband was ready to bless Esau and not Jacob. So I began to plot and scheme. We had to do something. And you might think this wrong of me to scheme against my husband. But to be fair, one time he told this king that I was his sister to save his own life. So this was just how our family operated. So I quickly called Jacob into the tent and I said, Jacob, we have to act fast. We're going to get this blessing and it's going to be on you, not your brother. Jacob at first was scared. He didn't know what to do. He said, but Mom, my father's not stupid. If my father finds out, he won't bless me. He'll curse me. I said, don't worry. Don't worry. If he curses you, I'll take that. It'll be on my head. So I quickly sent Jacob out. I told him to get 2 goats and bring them back. So he got the 2 goats, and we began to butcher them, and I began making the food that I knew my husband loved. And I sent Jacob to Esau's tent. I said, I need you to get his finest clothes. So as I was making the food, Jacob went to Esau's tent. He came back with his robes, and we quickly prepared the food and set it on the tray, and I dressed Jacob in Esau's robe, and then I took the skin from the freshly butchered goats, and I covered his arms and the back of his neck. This way he would feel like his brother Esau. Jacob his arms trembling, was carrying the tray to his father's tent, and I was following closely behind. And I sent him in, and where I crouched at the door where I could see and hear what was going on. Jacob was a little hesitant at first. He set the tray down, and he said, "Father, here I am." And Isaac was confused at first. He said, "Who are you?" He said, with a little more gusto, trying to sell it a little more, he said, "It is Esau, your firstborn." I could see that Isaac was not convinced. He said, "How did you find the meat so quickly?" And Jacob, he is smart. He thinks on his feet. That's why I love him so much. He said, "The Lord your God, he granted me success." A smile spread across Isaac's face. This had pleased him. He was like, "Of course, yes. My God does those types of things." He said, "Come here, let me feel you." So Jacob stepped forward, and he held out his hand, and he ran his hands on his son's forearm. And he said, "Well, the voice is of Jacob, but this is definitely Esau." We had almost sealed the deal. He said, who are you really?" Once more, Jacob said, "It is Esau." And my husband had one more test. He said, "Come here, I need to smell you." And thankfully, since I thought ahead, I had plotted and schemed, and Jacob was wearing his brother Esau's cloak, and we had just butchered this goat, and the skins he was wearing, he smelled exactly like his brother, like he hadn't showered a day in his life. So my husband took a big whiff in, and with his exhale, a smile spread across his face, and he spoke a blessing over my son. He said, "See, the smell of my son is the smell of the earth that the Lord has blessed. May you dwell of the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven, and with plenty of grain and wine. Let the peoples serve you. Let the nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons serve you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." We had done it. We had gotten the blessing on my son Jacob. I was so thrilled. Jacob quickly, he exited the tent, leaving the food for his father, and he ran out. And as I saw him leave, I saw in the distance Esau come back into camp. And this look of, just like any older brother could do, like pure bewilderment across his face as to what game his brother was playing dress up for across his face. You see, I hadn't really thought this far ahead into the plan. I was really focused on getting the blessing from my son Jacob that I hadn't really considered what would happen when Esau returned. Esau was on a mission. He went to the kitchen and he began preparing his food, and in no time at all, he was marching with confidence to his father's tent. I didn't know what to do, so I assumed my position as before. I crouched at the tent trying to see what was going on. Esau came in once he was ready, and he said, "Father, here I am." And Isaac looked pure confusion. He said, "Who are you?" He said, "It is Esau, your firstborn. I'm here for my blessing." And I watched as shock and terror and pain were suddenly painted on my husband's face as he realized what had happened. He said, "You were just here. I just blessed you. I just ate the food." And Esau finally put two and two together. He put together his brother's weird costume and his son hurrying from his father's tent, and he said, "That wasn't me." And anger and fury flashed on his face. He said, "That was my brother Jacob, that deceiver. He's so rightfully named. Father, you've been fooled. That was just Jacob. I'm here for my blessing, the blessing of the firstborn." Tears began streaming down my husband's face as he said, I've given your blessing away. Jacob has taken it. I can't give it to you." In anger, Esau cried out in fury. He said, "But Father, is there not one blessing you've saved for me?" Esau said, "This is the only blessing I have to give." He said, "Away from the fatness of the earth and the dew of heaven on high shall be your dwelling place. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow weary from him, you will cast his yoke from your neck." Esau left in such a fury and a rage. He was angry at my husband for being so easily tricked. He was angry at me for the role that I'd played, and he was angry at Jacob for stealing his blessing that he felt was rightfully his. He wouldn't talk to me. I heard from a couple servants that he was plotting and scheming. His anger wasn't cooling. He wanted to kill his brother. So I called Jacob to me, this son that I loved, and I said, "You need to go away. It's not safe for you to be here. Go to the land of Padan Aram. Stay with my brother Laban, and hopefully there you'll find refuge." My husband also called Jacob, and he sent him away, and he said, "When it's safe, we will send a messenger to tell you can come back when your brother's anger has cooled." You see, I've heard people recount this story over the years, but it's always a story of Jacob's deceit. But the way I remember this day is the day I lost both my sons. One wouldn't talk to me, and I had to send the other away. Esau continued to be mad and angry, and instead of taking for himself wives from among my people, as was our custom, he took for himself wives among the Hittites, the local women. And those women made my life bitter and miserable till the very end.
I got out of there as fast as I could. I told you, my brother Esau, he was a hunter. He knew how to track down animals. He could easily track down me. He could kill me. So I ran as fast as I could. And the first night, I reached this place and exhausted, I just took a stone and put that down and laid my head down on it. And suddenly I had this dream. Coming down from heaven to earth was this stairway, this ladder. And the Lord was there, and his angels were going up and down the ladder, going throughout the earth, doing his work, coming back and reporting to him. All of a sudden, that Lord spoke to me. He said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you are lying, I am giving to you and to your offspring. And your offspring will become a mighty nation. They will be as the sand of the seashore, and they will spread to the east and to the west and to the north and to the south. And through you and through your offspring, I will bless the earth. What's more, I will surely be with you and keep you until I have done these things. And I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you until I have done all that I promised you. I woke up and I had never had this kind of dream before, right? And I had seen the way my father Isaac had done different memorials to the Lord, so I thought, okay, I have the stone, and I put that down, and I had some olive oil that I was using to make bread for my journey, and it was semi-precious to me, and I poured it over the stone, and I said, for one thing, I couldn't believe it. Obviously, we would deceive my father, but had we actually deceived God as well, that he was blessing me? So I said, okay, God, if you really do all of the things that you say you're going to do, and you're with me, and you bring me back to this land, and give me all that you say you're going to give me, I'll give you 1/10 of that. And so I left that memorial there, and I made my way to Padanaram, Haran. It was, after all, a 450-mile journey, so I needed to get going. So on my way, after weeks of traveling, I finally came to this well. And there was these shepherd boys around there, and I said, I started talking to them, and I said, where have I reached? And they said, this is Haran. I couldn't believe my ears. This is great news. I said, do you know Laban, the grandson of Nahor? He's my uncle. They said, we do. Couldn't believe my luck. I said, is he well? I said, is he well? They said, actually, yes. Here comes his daughter, Rachel, now. His daughter, Rachel's coming. She had this flock with her, and their custom was not to uncover the stone from the well, until all the shepherds has arrived. But I thought, this is my uncle's daughter. And I moved that stone, flexed a little, pretty nice too, so she could see, moved that stone over, and I brought her flock over, and I watered them. And then I walked over to Rachel. I threw my arms around her, and I kissed her. She was a little shocked, of course, but then I explained to her, you see, you are my cousin. You're my cousin on your father's side. Basically, in our culture in that day, that meant we were a perfect match for each other. We could get married. Okay, think about this in light of the promise, right? Think about this in light of what God said he was going to make me a great nation, and now here's this perfect match for me. The first person, my first relative that I meet in Padanaram. So Rachel ran off and got her father Laban, and Laban came running back to see me, and I recounted to him the whole story of what had happened. And then this weird smile crept over his face that was going to be indicative of what was going to come. And he said, surely you are bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh.
Jacob loves to tell the story about the day we met, how he ran up and kissed me when I was expecting anything else. I quickly brought him back to my father's tent, and it was clear from Jacob's story that he wasn't able to go back to his land anytime soon, and that he'd be staying in our camp for a while. So they began to negotiate terms of their agreement. Obviously, Jacob had come from a line of shepherds, and he needed to be paid for his wages. So they struck a deal, and my father asked Jacob what he thought would be fair. And Jacob is fast. He thinks on his feet. He said, I'll work for you in exchange for your daughter. I'd like to marry her. So my father Laban said, okay, sure, calm down. If you work for me for 7 years, then you can marry her. Ooh, 7 years sounded like a long time to me, but Jacob quickly agreed. So our engagement was set, and he began working, and we began waiting. Finally, after 7 long years, the week of our marriage approached. My father began setting up tents, and they began having servants cook all this food. He began inviting people from near and far to come and celebrate with us. Me and my older sister, Leah, we were sitting in the tent that night. She was helping me get ready for when my father would come to take me to my husband. I was so nervous, and I was so excited. We had waited such a long time for this, but here it was finally happening. It was finally time. My father came into the tent, and he left me sitting there. He took my sister instead. He took my sister, my ugly older sister, to my fiance's tent and left me there alone. Jacob didn't realize what had happened until the morning, and I heard him cry out in pain. He cried out, and he came to my father Laban, and he said, what have you done to me? This is not what we agreed on. This was not the deal. And this smile, this like smirk came across my father's face. He just chuckled, and he said, Jacob, it's not our custom to marry off the younger before the older. I was furious. You see, this wasn't something that just came about. My father, if this was our custom, he had 7 years to marry my sister off, and he did it. It was clear to me that he was planning this from the very beginning, plotting and scheming. Jacob was mad, but he still wanted to marry me. He said, well, I still want to marry your daughter. I still want to marry Rachel. Laban said, okay, sure, calm down. Work for me for 7 more years, and you can marry Rachel. What was Jacob going to do? His hands were tied. He said, fine. Let me marry her, and I'll work 7 years. So the deal was struck. Now, we had to wait that one, my sister's bridal week. We had to wait that whole week before we could get married at the end. And though I had waited 7 long years while Jacob worked for me initially, those 7 years flew by in a flash compared to the 7 days that I had to watch Leah enjoy my husband instead of me. Finally, at the end of that week, we were married. It was clear to everybody, me, my sister, everybody else, that I was my husband's favorite wife. He loved me more than her. What can I say? He was willing to work for me, after all, for 14 years. Jacob's God also saw that I was clearly loved more than my sister. So he opened my sister's womb, and first she conceived, and she bore Gideon, and then Reuben, and Levi, and Simeon. Meanwhile, I didn't bear him any children. So I began plotting and scheming. This wasn't going to work for me. So when I'd gotten married, my father had given me a servant. So I sent my servant in to be with my husband, and through her I thought we could conceive some children. And sure enough, she conceived, and she bore him. There's so many kids I can't ever remember all their names, but she bore him Dan and Naphtali. My sister, again, not to be outdone, she sent her servant in to be with our husband, and she conceived, and she bore. Who's left? Just kidding. She bore Dan and Asher. I didn't know what to do. I was barren. Here, my husband had all these children from other women, but none from me. So I began plotting and scheming and coming up with ways. You know, there's all these different herbal remedies and aphrodisiacs, and I began plotting and scheming and trying to buy them from my sister and my servants, because clearly something was wrong. I came to my husband and I said, you have to give me children or I'll die. And he simply recounted to me the story of his mother and how she had been barren for 20 years. And he said, it's not up to me to give children. I was at a loss. I didn't know what to do. Leah conceived again, and she bore him 3 more sons, Zebulun and Issachar, and finally, the third one was a daughter, Dinah. I cried out in agony and pain. I didn't know what to do. I felt so forgotten. But finally, the Lord, Jacob's God, heard my cries for pain, and I conceived and bore him Joseph. And just as I had been my husband's favorite and most loved wife, my son was my husband's favorite and most loved son. It was clear from the beginning when Jacob arrived that everything he touched prospered. I mean, he told us that he came from a line of shepherds, but since the day he arrived, my father's flock and his wealth grew and grew and grew. This was great at first, initially, because for 14 years, Jacob worked for my father Laban. But as the 14 years came to an end, they began to renegotiate the terms of the agreement. You see, no messenger had come yet from Jacob's land to tell him it was safe to go back, so we were clearly still stuck there. So our goats were different breeds, and some were black and some were white, some coats were speckled, some were spotted, and they made these agreements based off how the sheep looked as to which portion of the flock would be my father's and which portion of the flock would be Jacob's. And it would drive you crazy to see how many times my father tried to change the terms of the agreement when he saw that, the goats looked one way, were doing better than the other goats, and he would try to renegotiate. And then I would see Jacob out in the field some days stripping bark off some trees and putting them in the troughs or putting them in front of them as they mated, trying to somehow make his portion of the flock stronger than the other. I had no idea what they were doing, but clearly whatever Jacob did, it worked, because no matter how many times my father changed the rules of the agreement, trying to seek advantage over my husband, Jacob's flocks grew and prospered. He had a stronger, more robust flock than my father did, his flock was really just weak and feeble. I wasn't the only one who noticed this. My brothers noticed this as well, and they could see that the family wealth was hurting. So they began to grumble and complain and speak against Jacob. So one day, as it seemed things were coming to a head, Jacob called me and my sister out into the field where no one else was. And he began to tell us, he said, "The Lord my God has come to me in a dream, and he's told me it's time to go back to Canaan." I was shocked. You see, we had not received a messenger yet to tell him his brother's anger had cooled off, so clearly it wasn't time yet, but here he was telling me that it was time to go back. Then he said, furthermore, in this dream, the Lord my God showed me that he said, "I've seen every time that your father-in-law has changed the wages and changed the terms of your agreement, and I alone have caused you to prosper and you to grow." I was shocked. You see, I had thought all along that Jacob was trying to do all these things, concoct this magic to somehow, that he had been successful, but suddenly it dawned on me that it had been the Lord, his God, that caused any of the blessing we had, it came clearly from him. In the rarest moment of ever, my husband asked my sister and I if we would go with him back to Canaan. And wouldn't you believe it, we agreed. We never agree on anything. But we agreed to go back with him. So we waited until my father was a few days away with his flock, and we began to quickly pack up all of our servants and our children and our flocks and our camels and our donkeys, and we began to plan to flee. When the day came, we fled. We ran as fast as we could. And my father, he eventually found out, he came back from his flock in the fields, and he found out that we were gone. So it took him 7 days, but when he finally caught up to us, he entered our camp, and he was furious. He came to Jacob and he said, "How dare you dishonor me? I have let you stay in my camp for 2 decades, and this is how you treat me? You flee in the dead of night, and you steal away my daughters and my grandchildren? You take from me. You've stolen gods and idols." You see, as we fled, it had dawned on me that it was Jacob's God that was more powerful than anything my father had ever worshipped or talked about. It was Jacob's God that had caused him to be blessed, to bring about wealth and benefit. And my father didn't need these idols that he had grown up worshiping. They were worthless. So I had stuffed some in my saddlebag as we fled. And here my father was, accusing Jacob of thievery. Jacob said, "Laban, you need to calm down. We left, but I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. Your daughters I worked for 14 years. And everything I have taken is mine. And as for these gods you're accusing me of taking, you can search anywhere. And whoever they're found with, we'll just kill." I was so nervous. I ran back to my tent and I sat on my saddlebag. And my father began tearing through the camp. He looked through my sister's tent, through our servants' tents, looking for these idols. Finally, he came into my tent, and I just lounged in the corner, sitting on the bag. I said, Father, you can look around everywhere, but the way of the woman is upon me, and I just can't get up. You see, in our culture and our time, that meant that no one could touch me, and anything I touched would also be defiled. So he wasn't going to ask me to move. So my father, in his fury, was tearing through, and I just sat on those idols and defiled them the best way I knew how. Finally, when he was done, Jacob had enough. He said, Laban, enough is enough. You haven't found anything. This has got to end. You've come in here and you have disrespected me and my family. This is over. So they came together and they made a covenant. My husband agreed not to take any more wives, and he agreed to care for Laban's daughters. And Laban agreed to not come any further into the land of Canaan, to not pursue Jacob any further. And in order to solidify this covenant, they broke bread together. But who did they call as a witness to this? They didn't call one of the servants. They didn't call one of my brothers. They didn't call anybody else. They didn't call any of my father Laban's idols or gods, but they called the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, my God, to be the witness of this covenant. They broke bread. We all ate together. There was finally peace in our family after so many years of manipulation and toil and strife. We went to bed in the morning. My father woke up and he kissed me, he kissed my sister, he kissed his 11 grandchildren, and he left. That was the last time I ever saw my father as we headed into my husband's land.
Good riddance to that guy, right? I mean, if you think you guys have in-law issues, I have some issues with that guy. So I started heading down into the land of Canaan. And as I was on my way, I looked over and first I thought I kind of saw this gleam, and then I looked a little closer, and it was, not only was it an angel or two angels, actually there was this entire encampment of angels. And my mind raced back to my journey up here, and I remembered seeing God's angels going up and down the stairway, reporting to him the work that they were doing throughout the earth. And I thought, is this God with me? So I sent messengers ahead because, as I told you, my parents, they said that they were going to send messengers to me when Esau's anger had cooled off. Remember, he was trying to kill me? And no messenger ever came. So how was Esau going to respond? I have no idea. So I sent some messengers to go meet him and entreat him and say, your humble servant, Jacob, is returning. We pray that you will treat him kindly. And they returned, and they told me, oh yeah, we saw Esau. And he's coming back all right with an army of 400 men. I don't know if you can imagine the terror that I was in at that moment. See, and I called out to God. I said, God, Lord, the God of Abraham, my grandfather, the God of Isaac, you promised that you would make me a great nation. Clearly, I am not worthy of all of the unfailing love and faithfulness that you've shown me throughout my journeys. I was only, when I came across to this part of the land, I only had a staff. Now, my family fills 2 great camps. But now Esau, he's coming to kill me. You said you were going to use my family. You were going to make us as many as the sand on the seashore so that we would be a blessing. What now? I quickly began to think and devise plans, because if God didn't show up and do his part, I certainly needed to do my part, and I was more than capable. So I took some of my sheep and some of my cattle and other portions of my herd, and I sent them ahead as gifts to Esau. This would be a way to slow down his army from advancing on me. And I also gifted him some of my servants, placing them on the inside of his ranks, hoping that they would remain loyal to me if Esau did truly attack me. And then I divided my family into two camps, Leah and her servant and all of her children, and Rachel and her servant and all of her children. And I thought, if one camp gets attacked, hopefully the other one will be able to get away. So it was becoming towards the evening, and I led them across the river, and they waited there, and then I found myself alone. And out of nowhere, this man came, and he grabbed me, and we began wrestling back and forth. For a while, he had the advantage. Then for a little bit, I had the advantage. Back and forth all night long. Eventually, dawn started to come, and he said, "Let me go." He touched my hip, and it wrenched my leg out of its socket, and it was just searing pain. I nearly let go of him, but I didn't. He said, "Let me go." And I said, "Not until you bless me." I had been striving after blessing all of my life, but I needed him to bless me. Then he asked me, "What is your name?" And I had to think back. Who am I? See, because my parents had named me Jacob, the deceiver. And that was the story of my life. And so the moment that I told him was really a moment of coming to terms with myself, that I was unworthy, that I am dishonorable. And I have to admit that to him. I finally told him, "My name is Jacob." And he said, "No longer shall your name be Jacob. From now on you shall be called Israel, for you have fought with men and with God, and you have prevailed." So I went limping back across the camp, and I saw the two, and it occurred to me, no more half-hearted obedience. All my life I followed God, trusting him just partly, and then doing what I thought I needed to do to make the rest of, things come together. But now I was his, and I needed to begin living in light of that. So I brought the two camps back together, and I put them in a line, my servants' wives behind me, and then my wives, Leah, and then Rachel and their children. And Esau was approaching, and I bowed down 7 times before him, and the 7th time I got up, he was standing right in front of me. And he grabbed me, put his arms around me, and then began sobbing. And you can imagine I cried too. He turned and said, "Jacob, who are all these people?" I said, "This is my family. Yahweh, the God of Abraham, our grandfather, the God of Isaac, my God has blessed me." Then he said, What about all those flocks and all those servants that I encountered on my way over here?" And I said, "Those are a gift to you." Esau said, "I have plenty. I don't have any need of those from you." But this, no longer was I just going to be taking blessings for myself. I realized that who I am, I need to be a blessing to others. So I said, "No, Esau, those are for you. Take them." Finally, he agreed. So that is Jacob's story. I have just a few questions for you to reflect on, and then we're going to be done for the day. First question: what does this story tell us about the way that God interacts with his children? Pretty interesting, huh? That he would take somebody who was actually dishonorable, who was actually really messed up, from a really messed up family, and make him into an amazing blessing. Second question: how would you responded? How would you have responded if you were Jacob? If you were Esau, right? We also heard from Rebecca. We heard from Rachel as well. What would your response have been? And then finally, who might we become if we were to live lives of full obedience, realizing that actually what matters in life isn't who I say I am, but who God says I am, and what's true of me. So we're going to transition now into a time of communion. And I'd encourage you to reflect on that, because being in Christ as believers, that is the reality that we stand on, right? It's based on who God says that we are. And so, as we're going to go into this time of communion, I'll have Bobby come up.
I think of that last segment with Mark where he talked about the idea of Jacob saying, "Who am I?" and him needing to acknowledge who he was before God. I am Jacob. I've been a deceiver. And God changed his name. He gave him a new identity. Now you're this. Excuse me, and there's really a gospel image to that we need to see as we think about communion, is that apart from God, we're not all that we were made to be. Apart from God, we're not living to the fullest and the extent that we were created to be. We were meant to be one with him. We're meant to find peace with him. We're meant to have life with him. And anything else apart from that, there might be good things along the way, there might be temporary things, but the reality is that apart from God, life isn't what life's meant to be. There isn't hope, long-term hope. There isn't joy. There isn't assurance. There's not purpose. It really becomes a shallow, self-centered, small existence when we're not truly one with God or living fully for him, the way Mark's last question directed us to. And so as we go to take communion now, we need to think through that reality. One, do you have a relationship with God? If not, you don't need to do communion right now. Communion is not for you. Communion is for those who have a relationship with God, to remember everything that he's done on the cross for us, his resurrection. You need to take this moment and examine your life before the cross to say, I acknowledge the reality that I need Jesus, that he took all of my sin and wrong, everything that causes the brokenness in my life and in this world, upon himself on the cross, so that I can know forgiveness and restoration and healing and new life, because he puts his righteousness upon me. He makes me a new creation. He is the one that is a giver of life. You need to acknowledge that. And so I would challenge you to do that this morning. If you do have a relationship with God, this is a time to remind yourself of who you are. There is no more important truth to the Christian, practically as we live, than our identity in Jesus. And Jacob's story, this Old Testament story, points to that reality. And so let's just take a moment like we do every Sunday, every time we do communion, just to be quiet before the Lord. The questions that Mark asked at the end, maybe a different part of the story that Josie said or Mark said that kind of stuck with you, maybe something I just said here at the end talking about Jesus. Allow God to prompt your heart with those things. And if you need to confess something, do that. If you need to express gratitude for something, do that. But we just be quiet before the Lord in prayer for a moment, and then we'll receive communion together. So God, I pray you would speak to us now in the quiet of this moment. Let us hear from you, and we worship you. Let's be quiet before him. Okay, would you stand with me? So we have a piece of bread representing Jesus, a piece of wafer representing Jesus' body, a portion of juice representing his blood, his broken body, his shed blood in our place. Acknowledging his death on the cross, acknowledging his life given out so that our sins could be paid for and we can find new life. We need to acknowledge who we are in him. And so, God, we thank you for the cross. We thank you for the tomb. We thank you that you defeated death and sin, that you have rose again, that our life is in you and you alone. God, I thank you that in the midst of knowing everything about us, the reality of our failings, the reality of our frailty, our weaknesses, our doubts, you loved us. While we were sinners, you died for us. And we are grateful for the forgiveness that we find in you, for the life that we find in you. God, I pray that you would help us to live fully within that reality. I pray that we would step into the fullness of our identity the same way that Jacob needed to. God, I thank you so much for your word this morning that reminds us of these things. God, I pray that you would continue to help us to just ponder the reality of who we are based on all that you've done. We're grateful for the cross. Let's receive communion together. Thank you, Jesus, for your body, for your blood, the cross, and the empty tomb. It's in your name we pray. Amen. We're going to close with one final song. Let's worship him together.
He's
If you can sing that true about your life, then thank God for that. But if you can't, let today be the day that you can. Become a child of God. If you have questions about that, if you're concerned about that, if you're trying to process that, please don't just let it go. We would love to help you. We would love not to coerce you or talk you into something or to pressure you, but just to walk with you. And so if you have questions, if you want to talk, please come and see me afterwards, see somebody with one of the lanyards. But that's the most important thing. If you're not with us right now, you're watching online, go into the QR code, fill out the spot that says need help, need prayer, or even if you're in here, you can do that, and we'll follow up with you. But there's nothing more important in your life than that idea of being a child of God. And so if we can help you, please allow us to do that. We're so grateful that you're here. Can we hear it from Mark and Josie, just doing such a great job this morning? It's just such a cool, creative message and very powerful. I would encourage you to go into Genesis and just read through the chapters about Jacob, revisit that story, think through some of the questions that they asked. But we're just really grateful that they're a part of our church and they could encourage us this morning. So if you can stick around and hang out for a little bit, that would be amazing. If not, we will see you next week. Have a great rest of your day.